Okay, so in this final lecture, I just want to say something about the advantages of natural law theory as well as the disadvantages, the problems with the theory. Um, some of these we've already looked at. Some of these I've kind of shelved, and we'll come back to this idea, that we might not agree about the intrinsic goods. I shelved that one. I'm going to say a lot more about that at the end of the lecture today. But first, let's talk about the advantages of natural law theory. Of course, I have to tell you what's good about the theory before I can start beating it up, tearing it down, right? All right. So the advantages of natural law theory, some of these things we've already looked at, and I think they're very important, right? So one thing is that it accounts for this idea that there is a difference between doing and letting happen. It's not just the consequences, how we're involved matters. Remember, utilitarianism can't do that. For utilitarianism, it's just all about the consequences. All that matters, how many people are alive or dead at the end of it, how many people are happy or unhappy, what happens, that's all that matters. Utilitarianism seems like it's going to see killing someone for their organs to save 5 people and letting one person die to save 5 people who need the same treatment as exactly the same. We don't think of them as the same, right? Natural law theory can account for that. The second thing is that natural law theory can account for the fact that intentions matter, right? It's not just what we do, why we do it matters. That's really important, right? If somebody does something and you find out, my doctor example, you find out he has a bad reason for it, you blame him, right? There's a difference between giving the organ to the right person for the right reasons, his medical prognosis, the fact that it will be more likely to save his life than the other guy, and giving it to him for the wrong reasons, the fact that he's rich and he can do more for your career, or he's important, right? For utilitarianism, that doesn't seem to be the case, right? Intentions don't come into it, your reasons for what you do, it just seems to matter what happens, what the consequences are. Finally, and I didn't talk a lot about this, but I think this is very important, and this is an advantage that natural law theory can legitimately claim, it gives us a very firm foundation for respect for persons and for some rights, right? Natural law theory will say you have to respect human life no matter what. Murdering an innocent person for his organs, no matter how many people you might save, that doesn't treat human life with respect. Framing an innocent person for a crime, well, that certainly doesn't show respect for human knowledge. Natural law theory would argue it doesn't show respect for human sociability because you're violating the very rules that we need to make a society survive, right? Utilitarianism has a very hard time not giving us the wrong decision in both of those cases. Wrong being kill the person or frame the person, right? Natural law theory seems to do a lot better with respect for persons and at least some rights, right? If you guys understand why that is, the idea that you have to show respect for these intrinsic goods no matter what means that it has a better foundation for respect for persons than utilitarianism. Okay, so what are the disadvantages of natural law theory? Well, 2 of these I think have already come up, especially in talking about the doctrine of double effect. And one of these just is that natural law theory is really inflexible. It says that we can't fail to show respect for these intrinsic goods no matter what. Well, that's going to be a problem, right? The utilitarian will say, Look, if you have to lie to someone's face to save a life, you would lie, right? If you have to, even more, if you have to kill an innocent person to save millions of lives, you might not like it, but most of you would do it. Natural law theory will say you cannot. That might be a problem, right? The very thing that allows it to have such a firm foundation for respect for persons also makes it inflexible. Or, in even, another case, natural law theory will say, well, even in a case where the mother and the fetus will die if she tries to bring the pregnancy to term, you can't end it because that fails to show respect for human life. You're deliberately killing. Well, very few people are going to agree with that, right? In this case, utilitarian reasoning, if we don't do this, 2 people die. If we do it, only 1 dies, even giving natural law theory the claim that the fetus is a person, which we could argue about. But even giving them that claim, the utilitarian approach seems more natural. It seems inflexible. It also seems legalistic, or you might say lawyerly, in a bad way. To put it another way, it splits hairs. What do I mean by that? Well, look, natural law theory will say, well, there's a huge difference between performing an operation that kills the fetus to save the mother's life and performing an abortion to save the mother's life. Well, natural law theory can give us an explanation why that is. That seems to a lot of people just to put a lot of weight on tiny distinctions, right? Or think about what it says about the physician-assisted suicide case. You can give the person a dose you know will be fatal to ease their pain, but if you give them the same dose with the intention of killing them, it's wrong. You might think that there's really no distinction there. There's a distinction between, giving someone, doing something that you know will end in their death, but you don't intend their death, and intending their death to ease their pain. I mean, it's hard to even explain what that difference is, as you guys can see with the way I'm kind of struggling with it here. Most of us would probably say to natural law theory, I don't see the distinction. And natural law theorists are clever. They can slice out the distinction, they can explain it, but these tiny differences they draw will often seem pretty unimportant to anyone who's not convinced of the truth of natural law theory. Finally, natural law theory rests on controversial claims about human nature. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, remember the sort of misgivings or skepticism you might have initially had that I said to shelve, that I would come back to? Well, I'm coming back to them. So look, here are 2 problems with claims about intrinsic goods. As I said before, and as I think that some of you probably suspected, some people don't want or desire the list of stuff on the the intrinsic goods, right? Plenty of people don't want to have children. Might be rare, but some people don't seem particularly curious. They don't seem to want to know stuff. Might be even rare still, but some people don't like being around other people. They might go off to the woods to avoid them, right? People who want to end their lives, that usually is a sign of mental illness, but it seems like the other 3, especially not desiring children, it seems like you can be perfectly normal and not want that. Where do you, Aquinas, get off saying that everybody desires these things? Why pick this list? What's more, Aquinas, there are plenty of things that most human beings seem to want or desire that are flat out bad, right? Revenge, right? I already mentioned this. It's pretty natural for human beings to want to hurt someone who has hurt them. Well, revenge isn't on Aquinas' list, and you can guess, being a Catholic, being a Christian, he wouldn't put a huge weight on revenge. People seem to want it, though. Why does he leave it off the list, right? Power over others. People want it, people desire it. Why leave it off the list? Wealth. People desire it, people want it, it's pretty common. Why do you, Aquinas, leave it off the list? Well, look, I think Aquinas' answer to both of these is going to have to come back to human purposes. Why do you include the good things on the list? Knowledge, procreation, sociability, life? Well, because those fit in with the purpose of human beings. Why exclude the bad things? Revenge, desire for wealth, power over others, because those don't fit with human purposes. We might want them, but that's only because we go bad, right? In the same way that it might be pretty common for a plant to get sick in a certain way or rot, that's not good for it though. So Aquinas would say, desire for these things, not natural, not good. Well, the problem, though, is to make these claims, to exclude the bad things and include the good things. Aquinas has to make a claim about the human purpose. For Aquinas, that's going to be the ends, the purposes that God has for us. Well, look, if to come up with your list, you ultimately have to go back to God's ends in creating human beings, then it seems like you are making your theory controversial, and you're making it controversial in almost exactly the same way as divine command theory. Why pick these things? Why value Aquinas' list of intrinsic goods? If the answer is, well, because of human purpose, and I say, well, why do you think human beings have a purpose? And your answer is, well, God created us for certain purposes. Well, you may very well reject that, right? That is very controversial. You might say, I don't think that those are God's purposes. Or you might just say, I don't believe in God, right? So in picking certain things as good, as intrinsically good, and excluding certain other things human beings want, Aquinas has to make claims about human purpose, and to do that, he has to make claims about God's purposes for us, but that gets to be incredibly controversial. The problem here is that there are some things about human nature that might be good. There are some things about human nature that seem incredibly bad, and any effort to base a system of ethics on human nature is going to have to deal with that. And that's going to be a very general problem with natural law theory. Other forms of natural law theory, as your reading pointed out, there are forms of natural law theory outside of Christianity. Cicero was an ancient Roman. He was not a Christian. He arguably has a form of natural law theory. So you might not have to bring God into it. But you are going, if you're going to be a natural law theorist, you are going to have to make some claims about human purpose. Human beings' final end or purpose in nature. Even if you don't bring God into it, making claims about the purpose of human beings is going to inevitably be controversial. Other people will reject those claims. At least they often will. If I say the purpose of human beings is X, you might justifiably say, nope, I don't believe that. Actually, the purpose of human beings is Y. Or you might justifiably say, no, I don't think we have a purpose. I think we just exist. We're sort of a lucky natural accident. So just to heck with all your talk about purpose, right? So that is ultimately going to be the problem with natural law theory. The fact that it's going to have to base ethics on claims about human nature, and to do that, it's going to have to make reference to claims about human purpose. That is inevitably going to be controversial. Now look, I put so much weight on this because I think this will be very important when we get to Kantianism in the next unit. Kantianism shares some features with natural law theory. And it's going to, it's going to be very different. It's not going to give this list of intrinsic goods. What Kantianism says deserve respect will be something entirely different. But it does put a lot of emphasis on this notion of respect, which is similar to natural law theory. And for reasons I won't bore you guys with, I think there's a good case to be made that Kantianism kind of developed out of natural law thinking, though it's different. The question, though, will be, how does Kantianism formulate its rules? Kantianism will, for reasons we've looked at and for other reasons, not want to make reference to any claims about human nature. Well, if you're not doing that, how are you going to get your rules? We will see that in the next unit.